Na ką, tai grįžtam po nedidelės pertraukos
Now we
ir
are coming back after a small break, and I will introduce our next speaker, Doctor of Science Eglė Mažulytė-Rašytinė, our colleague at the VILNIUS University Suicide Research Center. She is also a professor, a clinicist, psychologist, and a mother of two. We heard a presentation about mothers, maternal mental health and suicidality, and now we will hear about the situation in Lithuania. Enjoy it. Thank you, Sid. I will now share my slides. I hope you can see my shared slides. Hello, everyone who are at the other end of the screen. It's always difficult to speak just to the camera without seeing your faces, but I will try to imagine the audience. As Said has said, this presentation is a continuation of the previous one, where you heard a lot about the various researches and data on maternal mental health and suicidality in the UK. I will share with you the Lithuanian data, which is closest to us. You'll see that the presentation is a bit different. These are fresh data, which was never publicized, and it's the very first time that we are presenting the data in the suicide context. I am delighted that my colleagues have invited me to participate and make the presentation at this conference. I think that it's important that we speak about this topic. But before I move on to the presentation itself, I will say a few words about myself. When I listened to other speakers, I saw that they had a slide about themselves. I don't, but I will tell you about myself now. I am a researcher, a suicidologist, and a member of a suicide prevention center. It's important that I bring in another topic from my other activities. I am also a member of an NGO, the union taking care of maternity. And that's why you see two logos on my presentation. The Union of Initiatives Caring About Maternity. This participation, this membership helps me to get a global picture, not only from the academic point of view, but also from the public point of view. As Said mentioned, I am a clinicist and a psychologist. I practice psychology and consult people, including mothers who had just given birth to a baby or previously had given birth to a child and have encountered mental difficulties. So Said has mentioned that I am a mother of two, and this is a personal and very practical experience, which is very important for every scientist and researcher, which gives you to look at the problem under investigation from another angle, so that you are not biased, but rather are able to understand the problem in an empathic way. So these all areas of my activity where I work and where I live are very important when understanding what mental health challenges are encountered by women in the period after giving birth. Here, in this slide, you are the indicators of Lithuanian suicides, and this pink line demonstrates our suicide rate. Although our suicide rate is declining, it is still one of the leading indicators in Europe. And we know that in Lithuania, mostly middle-aged and elderly men can die of suicide. And as regards women of the reproductive age, suicide is rather rare among them. So this slide, the pink line, demonstrates the suicide rate among reproductive age women. And the age group, this from 15 to 49 years, which is quite a wide span, but it doesn't mean that these are the mothers, because the age when women on average give birth in Lithuania is over 30, but here we have the scale from 15 to 49, to 49. And if we speak about the span, this is a quite wide span. And we see that in 2020 in Lithuania, 37 women died of suicide, in 2021, 35, 2022, 30, 2023, 34 reproductive age women. But if we speak about those women who have recently given birth to a child, and or to speak more widely, who learned about the pregnancy before their suicidal attempt, the figures in this group are lower. I will show you the figures, and here I would like to thank my colleague Ms. Jurkevičienė, because we made this research together, and we analyzed a lot of data in Skaidra, which is the information system of compulsory health insurance. This data was being analyzed in order, that is Skaidra, in order to understand what happens in a person's life and what is related to the health condition and what is recorded in health systems. So I asked Jurgita to have a look whether a year before the suicide, if there was some record related to mental health, in order to be able to get the overall view of the situation. So we went back to 2016, 2018. We see that the number of suicides is low, which is good on the one hand, and on the other hand, what we heard in our previous presentation, in the perinatal period, the number of suicides is quite low. That's why there can be there cannot be many cases, but in any case is painful.
atradome, tai pavyzdžiui, atvejis, kai yra užfiksuotas metų laikotarpyje iki savižudybės užfiksuotas nesivystantis nėštumas ir vėliau
what may have caused that? Well, we see that there was a threat of miscarriage recorded, or a year before the suicide, the lack of development of the fetus was recorded, and whether this was the cause, we can only guess. In 2017, there was a case when a woman gave birth to a child and killed herself in 3 months. So every story is painful, and we can only speculate what was happening in the woman's life at that time. When we were drafting this presentation, we talked to Jurgita, and Jurgita said that she had new data, and we researched the suicide cases from 2021-23. You see a few cases here, and we have a few women after giving birth, that is postpartum, and we also have ectopic pregnancies, that is this pregnancy could not develop further, and there were no records about another pregnancy, although the woman committed suicide 6 months after the pregnancy was confirmed. So these stories must have been very painful. So very often psychologists use the picture of an iceberg, a metaphor of the iceberg, and I will use it too, because suicides are only the tip of the iceberg. As I have said, cases are not numerous, but as we know, each suicide hides more attempts, suicidal attempts, and it's more difficult to collect the statistics about suicidal attempts. Moreover, we consider external factors, suicides and suicidal attempts are not always visible, or sometimes there are visible signs of a suicidal attempt, but these signs are not clearly identified. So what we have under the water of the iceberg is what we can't see: suicidal ideation and suicidal planning. So this is what we have in the context. Suicidality is mostly related to suicidal ideation in my presentation, which we can analyze. And as I have said, this data is different from the previous presentation. Of course, it's common sense that the UK is a country which is much more numerous in terms of the population, and of course the number of suicides is higher because of the higher number of population, and therefore the analysis can be done in various cross sections. But when we have only a couple of suicides, it's difficult to analyze suicidal ideation. Where do we get the data from? I have mentioned that I am a member of the Union of Initiatives Caring for Maternity, and this union aspires for a psychologically acceptable postpartum care for women, and in general mental health of postpartum women. And we were inviting women to participate in this research, and we see how many women have responded. So we have a lot of data. And in my practice as a researcher, this is a unique experience to have so much data. When this data comes directly through women, interviewing women rather than from registers. If you have some registers where you have the information of all country residents, you can have a very wide database. But when we ask, interview people and go directly into contact with them, it's not easy to collect all the connections. And here you see the data, the 4-year data of the interview that we conducted.
Iš moterų, kurios gimdė 20 metais, 1539.
So out of the women that gave birth in 2020, we had 1,539 women participating in our survey. Out of those who gave birth in 2021, 2,211 women participated in our survey. Out of those giving birth in 2022, it was 1,759, and then out of those who gave birth in 2023, 1,468. The survey was conducted anonymously by internet, and that was very convenient for women. We took into consideration that we are talking about women who gave birth within the period of 3 to 18 months prior to interviewing them. And they had to fill out the questionnaire, which was really long. And it was much more convenient to do that by internet. Another advantage of this data was that was an interview which was advertised via social networks and the media. When women received the information about the possibility to participate in this survey was from the outside. It was external sources, not the hospital where they were giving birth. And if the woman is just a few days after the delivery of the baby, then the results of such interviews and surveys are a lot different than when women respond a few months after the birth. So we conducted those surveys via the NGO, and that ensured the continuity of this survey. You see the 4-year data, but we also had the previous data. I have not included them here. They are methodological data. I will speak about that later. That is a rare opportunity to have an updated database on a yearly basis, but at the same time it is also challenging, and I will mention the challenges later. Now, speaking about the representative sample of the data, this survey is not very representative. We tried to reach various women from various Lithuanian counties. I did not include those slides of the map, but we tried to cover all of Lithuania from the various Lithuanian counties. At the same time, you can see the comparisons with the official statistics. In the corner, you see the Hygiene Institute medical data, which is the official data about all births which happened in Lithuania that year.
Šitos mano gimdymas apklausos.
And then you see the comparison side by side in the section My Birth, Mano Gimdymas, and you see that we were able to interview from 69% of women who were giving birth, who gave birth in that year, and the average age of those women is very similar. We were able to reach more women who gave birth naturally rather than after the cesarean section. And we also reached the women giving birth for the first time. The percentage was also higher. This is not a very representative sample, but because they are so numerous, these data are very reliable, and we can see quite a wide view. It does not fully reflect Lithuania, but it reflects Lithuania quite well. Now, what about the challenges? Having continuous surveys is challenging, as well as having a survey via an NGO. NGOs have their own objectives, and our union mostly targets and considers birth experience, which is very important for the work of the organization. And here I would like to speak about the mental health or maternal mental health and their suicidality, which means that certain questions which I involved into the mentioned interview on my own initiative, and you cannot always ask those questions every year, they are related to the mentioned topics. So I briefly mentioned a few topics and what data this covers, whether it covers the whole, all the data. So the most recent surveys are those where we had started asking women about their suicidality. And that was also on my scientific initiative, but also through responding to the realia about which the public had started talking when painful events would be described and discussed upon in the media when women after birth commit suicide. Now I will move on to the data itself. First of all, we have to consider what kind of women give birth. So I will speak about the period before pregnancy and before the delivery. You see a percentage of women, and the question is whether women before the pregnancy and delivery had ever attempted or the suicide or had the suicidal ideation. 20% said that that was a short-lived ideation. 4% said that they had planned at least once on how they could kill themselves, but they did not want to commit suicide. Then 2% of those who had planned and wanted to commit suicide, one had had an attempt to commit suicide but did not want to die, and 1% wanted to die and attempted suicide. And we asked them whether it was related to a pregnancy. Maybe this attempt was like 10 years ago, and the risk of suicide was not necessarily high. We heard today in the morning that it's very difficult to evaluate the risk, and the prediction is not necessarily accurate. And therefore, we wanted to just get the overall view rather than think about the potential percentage. And we tried to clarify how many women had psychological difficulties, and 16 and 14% said that before pregnancy they had clear mental difficulties and applied for help, while 16% say that at least once during the last year before pregnancy they had suicidal ideation. So these women come to the period of giving birth. I will not dwell upon this, but with our colleague at our organization, NGO, we had talked about women's delivery experience at a number of conferences, and this is one of the publications that we had issued, which was related to the pandemic period and how the pandemic outlined the shortcomings in the existing delivery system. Officially in Lithuania, we have been observing the delivery medical data, and one of the most important indicators when evaluating the health and morbidity and mortality of women giving birth and the newborns. This is one of the main indicators, and the indicators are quite good, but it seems like 15% of those women considered their subjective delivery experience as bad and traumatizing. But although delivery should be something joyful, but it may turn to a painful experience which may contribute to further mental health challenges. Various scientific research shows that it does contribute and that this is important, and the mental health is related to their condition after delivery.
Moterų nurodo, kad gimdymo metu iš medicinos personalo patyrė įvairaus tokio netinkamo elgesio, kaip pavyzdžiui patyčių, gąsdinimo ar net prievartos. Ir žinoma, kad tai nuspalvina tą gimdymo patirtį, net jeigu pats gimdymas yra kažkoks tam tikrą prasme sklandus, mediciniškai nėra kažkokių komplikacijų, bet jeigu toje patirtyje yra įvairaus netinkamo elgesio iš medicinos personalo, tai irgi objectively vertinimo kaip traumuojančios gimdymo patirties, net successful delivery because the mother is safe and the baby is healthy, but the experience itself might not be the best. And this is not an isolated problem characteristic only for Lithuania. Here, coming back to the presentation of Daumantas, who said that Lithuania is not very different from other countries. So speaking about the challenges in this context, other countries also have such challenges. In the UK, a parliamentary study was carried out, and in the results saw that the harmful delivery services are becoming a norm in our society. So here in Lithuania, we also face very similar concerns, very similar difficulties. Now let's go to the mental health issues. I will start in a different order. I will not start with the postnatal depression. This is a diagnosis that attracts much attention, but I will speak about
kas leidžia moteriai sakyti, kad jos gimdymas buvo traumuojanti patirtis, tai gali vėliau moteris dėl to patirti
post-traumatic stress disorder. So if the delivery has been a traumatic one, there is a higher risk of this problem. Only a couple of percents in our studies and in the studies carried out in other countries. So 1% for the women who give birth in 2021. It was the pandemic year. You might remember that during the pandemic year, very harsh measures were introduced. For example, the mothers could not have their couple with them. They had to use a mask, and there were more harsh measures in place, which contributed to a worse subjective experience of the delivery. But we see a figure that is not very clear for us. Why is this figure here in the statistics? But during the last year, we had more interviews, more respondents from women who had
tas galėtų paaiškinti, bet kol kas dar turbūt reikės ir vėlesnių metų duomenų, kad
section. And the results are different, but I think that we just need some time to assess retrospectively these data. If we speak about the postnatal depression, we see that the percentage is more or less stable from 22 to 24% of women might have had significant symptoms of postnatal depression. These figures are very similar to the figures that we see in studies abroad. Not long ago, in 2022, several changes were introduced in the perinatal services and mental health services. In October 2022, every women that have given birth can go home from the hospital only if she had been informed about the postnatal depression and its symptoms. And we saw that from the answers of our respondents that after this change, the data is different. Those who gave birth before, 18% of them, only 18%, said that they received information about postnatal depression at the hospital. And after this date, after this change, 56, 50, 54, 67 in 2023. Why 67%? Don't the hospitals comply to the rules? No, as we see, women are informed in writing. They get a leaflet, and only 0% of women say that they have been informed orally. But everybody understands that if it's only in written form by a leaflet, these leaflets simply they get lost among other advertisements and other presents and gifts for the baby and for the a mother, and if this leaflet is somewhere among these presents, it might be that the mother has not noticed the leaflet and hasn't read it. So one of the challenges is that the medical personnel does not want or is reluctant to speak about mental health with women, and they need more skills to speak about these questions. I wanted to see if this information about postnatal depression has any result on or effect on the mental health of these women. I haven't seen any links between the information and the further problems. This does not mean that informing does not help. But another important aspect is that we can see from the data that we have from the last year, women who had been informed in the hospital about postnatal depression. Now I see an error in my slide. These women to look for help more often. Frequently, or it is more likely that they look for help if they had been informed. So, it is important to inform about the postnatal depression, and it has an effect on the fact of looking for help. What could be said about the suicidality after giving birth? 25% of women indicate that at least once after giving birth, they felt so bad that they would want to be dead, to fall asleep and not to wake up. This could be seen as a indirect suicidal ideation. She doesn't think about suicide, but she thinks that she would not like to live. Thoughts about suicide, 15% said that at least once they felt so bad that they thought about suicide, and 16% said that at least once they felt so bad that they wanted to do something to their baby, although they wouldn't do any harm to their baby normally. I indicate also this number because it is very important speaking about suicides, because we see this figure reflects the inner stress, the inner tension of that person. If she says that she would harm her baby, and later it could contribute to suicidal ideation.
And based on this data, we see that the earlier the woman giving the birth to the baby, the more frequent they have suicidal ideation, and if a cesarean section was made, but it is not related to the number of births and children they have. Another factor that I included in my slide is that sometimes it is thought that suicidal ideation equals the postnatal depression. So that is, if you have suicidal ideation, you should be having depression. But our research in our interviewed groups has shown that this does not necessarily equal one or another. The diagnosis of the depression doesn't mean that the person might have suicidal ideation and vice versa. So today's data shows that 27% of women having suicidal ideation after birth did not experience any postnatal depression signs. What about emotional help for women in the postnatal period, or the help that they might receive and the emotional support that they might receive or need? You can see that a substantial part of women, more than half, indicate that they receive emotional help on a daily basis or a couple of times a week. And quite a large part, 9%, to my mind, this is a big part of women, say that they have never had any emotional support from anyone. Who will provide that emotional support? Normally it's the partner, your next of kin, or friends. That's why it's very important to say that when emotional support may be given remotely or live, it's common sense that it is much more frequent when it is provided remotely, and it's of course common sense that you cannot be social in a socially active environment when you are taking care of your baby. Then you can see how women were looking for the emotional support. More than 50% of women were asking, were inviting their partners. They actually joined various groups or clubs or addressed emotional support services, for instance, parents hotline. And 11% of women indicated that they didn't have the resources to take care of their emotional welfare. There are women who do not get emotional help and do not have the resources to look for it. They can be left alone in a difficult situation, and it's quite a large number of such women. Now, to summarize the suicidality among women, I have prepared this slide, and I will try to be very straightforward, very simple in explaining this slide. We are trying to analyze what will reduce the probability that women should think less frequently about their suicide, and we can find the links about these actions existing. Well, all those actions are related to more frequent ideation about postnatal suicide. This is determined a lot by the young age and the way the birth took place, that is a natural birth or cesarean section. And of course, psychological difficulties before pregnancy also have a link to postnatal suicidality or suicidal ideation, as well as stress after the birth. Now, the information or raising awareness in hospitals about postnatal depression is a very good aspect. Those who do not understand the statistics, please be aware that if it's more than one, this is a risk factor. If it is less than one, then this is a protective factor. So if women were informed about that, this is related to less frequent suicidal ideation.
gali būti, kad tai eina būtent per pagalbą.
So it may be that
patiriu sunkumų ir žinau, kad galiu
if
kreiptis pagalbos ir
a
kreipsiuosi,
person
tai galbūt ir
experiences
tada
difficulties
galvoju apie
and
tą
knows that
tokį
they can
kraštutinį
apply
variantą,
for
kai,
help, they will
nesvarstau
opt
apie savižudybę, bet
for
siekiu
the
pačios pagalbos.
extreme
Lygiai taip pat
option
subjektyvus
less
savo gimdymo
frequently.
patirties vertinimas, kaip sakiau,
Also,
gimdymo
a
patirtis irgi yra
subjective
svarbi, susijusi
evaluation
su
of
mamų
the
psichikos sveikata. Tai kuo
delivery
subjektyviai
experience
vertinama
is also
pozityvesnė,
very
teigiamesnė gimdymo
important.
patirtis, tuo
If
rečiau galvojama apie
the
savižudybę.
delivery experience is positive, then the suicidal ideation is rare, and the correlation is very straightforward. Regarding the caring behavior of the medical personnel, this is a very important factor influencing suicidal ideation, and vice versa. If there's bullying or mockery on the part of the medical personnel, this encourages suicidal ideation. I'm following the time, and I would like to leave some time for questions. But I would also like to show you the wider view. In English, we have such a term, matrescence, which in Lithuanian also has an equivalent. And why is it important? Why am I speaking about it when I am making the presentation on maternal mental health? You may have encountered that term, and you must have noticed that it was created in order to reflect the links between the process when a woman becomes a mother and the teenage works, adolescence. So this is maternity plus adolescence in English, and in Lithuanian it's a different equivalent. This term reflects the change of in the woman's life. Why am I speaking about that? Because I think that we have to speak about that more and more, and to see, to view this period of the woman becoming a mother as a very sensitive period. Why do we have this allusion to the adolescence? Neuroscientists also indicate that when a woman gives birth, there are changes happening in her brain that can equal the changes undergoing during adolescence. In teenage years, a child looks for their identity and becomes an adult. So here we have also a huge change in identity and pathological changes, because a child was inside the body and now the child is placed on the breast of the woman. And there are so many changes at various levels happening: physiological, neurobiological, social. The woman, having become a mother, has a completely different social life as well. And I talked about that when I talked about emotional support. That is the overall identity changes, what a woman was like before the birth. She had certain social roles, and now she has a completely new role. She is a mother, and certain other roles may disappear. The relationships change with the partner, within the family. If there are other children in the family, all structures rearrange themselves. This is a huge change. That's why it's extremely important to speak about that as something significant, a significant period, developmental period, and to concentrate on that. And we know that within a very difficult adolescence period, there are suicides happening. That's why various ideas may arise during matrescence, and it's not always a smooth process. And I'm coming back to the fact that that suicidal ideation does not equal post natal depression. Matrescence does not equal the does not equal mental health challenges. We need to think not only about the assistance provided by mental health specialists, but about a wider picture, the help that can be provided by the family and the close people as well, and what our society can do, and what resources can allocate to the women experiencing this process of matrescence. I would, at the very end, I would like to mention a few initiatives and examples of what the wider public can do, not only the psychiatrist or psychologist. On the one hand, in order to be able to see women empathically in this matrescence process, and as specialists recognize these changes, we need changes. And now we would like to mention the postnatal depression center that carried out comprehensive training for the medical staff, for obstetricians, for nurses and sociologists, social workers, on how to recognize depression. As I have said, the medical personnel should have the skills to speak to women, to ask them, to tell them about the possible mental health challenges, and provide them with possible assistance. Now we have also a wider mothers community which provides emotional help, and we have a few nice examples of such communities as Kalba Mamos, Auganti Šeima, the Growing Family, and so on. Regarding suicidality, I am delighted with the initiative Look Deeper, and the initiative of the mental health ambassador. There were quite a number of events in Lithuania on postnatal depression. When we speak about suicide prevention, we often speak about the Werther's effect, and in a different context, especially the suicides among young people. Paulius had alluded to that at the beginning of the conference, but today people speak about that more often. Nowadays, we often speak about the reverse pathogen effect. How should we speak in the media to reduce the number of suicides? And this is a very good example, this initiative, that is mental health ambassadors. These are people who personally share their stories about how they encountered mental health challenges and how they were trying to overcome them. So these are sensitive stories showing that one can manage mental health challenges, and that assistance is available, and what kind of assistance that can be. This is a valuable resource. I'm delighted that such initiatives are effective. So this is the end of my presentation, and I see that I have left only a few minutes for questions, but you have my contacts here, and if you want, you can contact me anytime. Thank you.
Ačiū labai, Eglė, už tokį išsamų,
Thank you,
įdomų,
Eglė,
naudingą
for a very
pranešimą.
comprehensive, interesting, and
Atrodo
useful
svarbu, kad ne
presentation.
tik tokius
It's
naujausius
important
duomenis
that
pristatei,
you
bet ir
presented not
tokį
only the
platesnį
most
motinystės
recent
kontekstą
data, but
įvardinai,
also a wider
resursus,
maternity
galimus,
context
nevyriausybinės
and possible
organizacijas. Atrodo, kad
resources
tai
and
tokios
NGOs.
labai svarbios temos.
These are very
Tai
relevant
galime pereiti
topics.
prie klausimų.
Now we will have some
Taip,
questions.
Ar žinote kokių nors tyrimų, kurie
Do you
diagnozuotų
know any
nevaisingo
research
moterų
that would
savižudybės
diagnose
ir
the
atitinkamai būtų
suicides
palyginamos su
by
moterų, kurioms buvo
infertile women
patvirtintas nėštumas
compared with
duomenimis?
that of women for whom
Ne, beje, tokių tyrimų
pregnancy was confirmed?
nesu sutikusi.
Unfortunately, I
Gali
don't
būti,
have
kad
such
galbūt yra,
research.
bet tikrai ne Lietuvoje.
I have not
Lietuvoje,
seen
sakyčiau,
such
kad tie
research, at least not
tyrimai
in
dar
Lithuania.
tiktai skleidžiasi.
In
Daugiausiai, ką
Lithuania,
galima
the
matyti,
research
tai
is
būtent
just
apie
appearing,
pogimdyvinę depresiją,
especially
apie kitur
mostly what
šiek
we
tiek
can
kabutėse
see
ant
is
bangos tema,
postnatal
bet tai yra
depression
svarbu ir aš
research,
džiaugiuosi, kad
and this
nuo
is
to
a very
pradedame ir apie
popular
tai
topic at
kalbame,
the
apie
moment, and I'm
suicidališkumą.
delighted
Tikrai,
that we have started
turbūt
speaking
taip,
about that.
gal drąsiai
Regarding
teigsiu, bet tai, ką
suicidality,
šiandien pristatinėjau, tai vieni pirmųjų tokių duomenų apskritai.
the data that I
Tai
have presented is
dėja, na, vat
among
dar,
the first
kas
ones that
liečia
we have.
nevaisingumą, tai
And
negaliu
regarding
pasidalinti.
infertility,
Galbūt
I don't have
kažkur
any
yra
data,
užsienio tyrimų, bet
but
aš
maybe
tiesiog
there are some
nesusidūriau.
research. There is some research abroad.
Kitas klausimas yra
Okay,
apie
another
medikų
question
bendruomenės
is about
supažindinimą.
raising
Kiek ir
awareness
kaip yra
among the
supažindinama
medical
medikų bendruomenė su
community.
jūsų tyrimo
To what
rezultatais?
extent
Kokia tikimybė,
does the
kad
medical
požiūris į
community
gimdančias
learn about the
moteris ir
results
jų
of your
išsakomus
research? What is
poreikius
the probability
pradės keistis
that
į teigiamą pusę,
they will
kad net
change
apskritai
the
nebūtų
attitude
trauminių
about
streso
the
sutrikimus?
women's needs in the postnatal
Tai
period,
yra
so that the
svarbi
postnatal
veikla
depression
būtent
doesn't
nevyriausybinės
happen.
organizacijos, dėl ko na, ta
The
apklausa
NGOs
apskritai
conduct a
rengiama,
very
kad
important role in here.
įgarsinti gimdyvės.
This
Tai kas
is the
įgarsinti, tai
reason why
reiškia tą
we
žinią
conducted
nunešti, ar
that
ne,
survey,
medikų
so that
bendruomeniai,
the voice of
mūsų organizacija tikrai
the
yra turėjusi
postnatal
daug įvairiausių
women
susitikimų
gets
su medikų
heard.
bendruomenėmis
Our
ir
association
tikrai
has had
tas
many meetings
bendradarbiavimas
with
su vienomis ar
the
kitomis
medical
yra tapęs
community.
labai glaudus, kada
We have
medikai
a
net
very
ir laukia ir
close
klausia, tai
communication
kada, žodžiu,
when medical
galėsite pristatyti,
practitioners
kaip čia
even
pas mus
wait
yra
for us
tokia
and
ta
ask us
situacija.
to
Ir
present the existing
dalį duomenų, kas
situation.
labiau liečia būtent gimdymo
Part of the
priežiūrą,
data related
tai
to
galima viešai rasti, susipažinti
postnatal
mūsų
care
organizacijos
is available in the website of our organization.
apklausos rezultatų, kur galima
We have
pasilyginti
a tool for
atskiras
survey
net ir
results where
ligonines
you
ir
can compare
įvairias praktikas
separate
tenais taikomas. Tai va
hospitals and the practice applied there.
nevyriausybinės organizacijos tikslas yra
The objective of
bendradarbiauti
the
ir
NGO
garsinti,
is
nešti tą
to
žinią.
cooperate and
Kartais dėja tenka pripažinti, kad mums pritrūksta tų resursų, nes kaip
raise
kiekviena
awareness. Of
nevyriausybinė
course, sometimes
organizacija
we lack
remiamės daugiausiai
resources.
savanoriška ta veikla ir tada tų jėgų
Mostly
pritrūksta,
we
jeigu
have
kažkam
volunteers
iš
working at our
besiklausančių
organization.
tema aktuali,
So
labai
if
kviečiu prisijungti
anyone
prie
feels
organizacijos ir būti dar
related
vienu
to this
pranešėju
topic,
informacijos.
please join us
Dar
and
turbūt
become
atliepiant į
the
pačią pabaigą,
messenger
kad visai nebūtų to
of this
potrauminio streso,
information.
na tai turime
Now,
suprasti, kad
in
yra
order to
net
avoid
kažkokių aplinkybių, kurių mes niekaip
post-traumatic stress
negalime
disorder,
sukontroliuoti. Ir viena dalis
well,
yra kažką, ką
there are
galime
certain
keisti, pavyzdžiui, jeigu tai yra
circumstances
kažkoks
that cannot be
netinkamas
controlled. For instance, there are
elgesys, bet yra
situations
kita
which can be
dalis, tam
changed,
tikros
like inadequate
komplikacijos
behavior,
gimdymo
but
metu,
there are
kurių
certain
negali
complications
išvengti, ar ne?
during the
Ir įvyksta
birth
tikrai
which you
labai
cannot
skaudžių
avoid.
dalykų,
Painful
kartais,
things
na,
happen
gimsta
sometimes,
negyvi
for
kūdikiai
instance,
ir tai vis tiek bus
stillborn
trauminė
babies.
patirtis, tai
And
na,
this is also
tikėtis, kad
a
niekada nebus
post-traumatic
to potrauminio
experience.
streso,
You
na,
cannot
nebūtų
expect that
realistiška, bet jų sumažinti tikrai
post-traumatic
būtų galima.
stress disorder will never happen, but we can reduce the occurrence of that. This is a very important deliverable. Thank you for sharing this. We have time for a few more questions. One question is related to the survey itself and its questions. To what extent how you
tai tiesiog
evaluated
moters subjektyvus
bullying and
požiūris,
um,
ar tirti asmenybiniai
violence,
bruožai, projekcijų galimybės,
coercion
ankstyvesnės
during
patirtys.
birth.
Taip, tai norisi pasakyti, kad tai ir yra subjektyvus požiūris, subjektyvus patyrimas.
This is a very subjective experience, but this is the most important one because the traumatic event cannot be objectively evaluated. You cannot say that what has happened is traumatizing and something else what has happened is not traumatizing. It's the subjective understanding of how you experience it. For instance, if it is a traumatic experience to you, it is a trauma. We are speaking about mental health, and subjectivity is very important here. This is what I want to emphasize. I understand why you want objectivity, but I would like to emphasize that subjectivity is much more important, especially when we speak about post-traumatic reactions. If that was a traumatizing delivery for a woman subjectively, that means that woman is experiencing a post-traumatic stress. Nobody can measure that. Yes, reality is subjective. We have time for one more question.
Kaip galėtų padėti antojaus? Daug klausimų labai atėjo vienu metu.
Many questions arrived at one time.
Kaip galėtų padėti partneris, kai
How a
moteriai jau
partner can help
akivaizdžiai
when
blogai?
a woman is obviously feeling unwell,
Bloga, bet pati ji niekur nenori
but
kreiptis.
the woman cannot apply for help herself. There's no one universal solution, but naturally, if they are in a long-term relationship, the partner should know what the partner's woman needs. Secondly, one needs to speak openly. I want to help you. Can you tell me what would help you and what does not help you? What is not suitable to you in this situation? What could help you? And that openness helps. And another important aspect, which is important, is not only asking, but also being able to hear the response, being sensitive, being able to listen. What is wrong and how the partner can help? Because sometimes certain ways in a certain situation are such that you are not able to think about. Well, there are so many questions, but not enough time. And thank you for sharing such a relevant slides.